I'm,
Is this a
which I'm
live
now
interview?
okaying, and I'm
Okay.
just going to put the chat up here so I have some stuff about you, and we'll go live. Okay, so I am Frank Schaeffer, and this is my podcast called In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer, and today I'm talking to Gina Goldhammer, and because of her Italian residency some of the years, I want to call you Gina. Che fatto, Gina? Tutto bene? So here you go. And that's the book we're talking about. Before I get into that, I'm going to make this introduction proper by saying that you can follow this conversation on YouTube Live now and sign up, et cetera, et cetera. But my guest is Gina Goldhammer. Gina grew up in communist Yugoslavia and New York. She now lives in Florida and also spends time in London and Venice and is sitting presently in London as we speak. Gina has a master's degree in literature from Harvard, and after graduation worked briefly on Wall Street and at US News and World Report magazine. For the next 20 years, she was the personal editor of the former US Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, and worked with him closely on all his books, speeches, and news columns, including his 1994 seminal work, Diplomacy, which is a textbook in all sorts of places. Um, Her debut novel is what I've got in my hand here, Where Snowbirds Play. And Gina, the first thing I'm going to ask you, which you don't need to scramble around right away, but I'm going to see if you will possibly gift us with a little bit of a reading from bits I've chosen to ask you to read. Have you got a copy of this book handy?
I do. Over here, if you'll just hang on one
Take your
second.
time and go get it. Yeah.
It's in my bookshelf here.
Good.
Here it is. It's right here, and I have a hardcover.
Well, let's hope the page count's the same so we can find the
Yeah,
spots.
you're
But
right.
don't worry, right now we're not going to do that. The first
All
thing we're
right.
going to do is just say that here's how I prepared to interview you, and I just want to show you the book itself as evidence that I am not your uninformed podcaster going to publicist questions. Look at the dog-eared book here.
Oh,
All
good for
right.
you.
So
Bless you.
that is a red book. And when I dog ear a page, as I did, for instance, on this page, I have notes to myself,
Ah.
questions for
Mhm.
you. So we're really going to talk about this book. And
All
we're going to
right.
do that for two reasons. First of all, I think it's a terrific novel. I love it.
Oh, thank
And
you.
secondly, I'm so impressed with you because not only have you had a very interesting life, but I found out a little bit about your biography, and I try to find traces of you in this book. I've written four novels and maybe a dozen nonfiction works, and in my novels, of course, I always get questions from readers saying, "How much is from your life? How much did you experience? How much is completely made up?" Um, People want to know that, so we'll talk about that a little bit. But I'm going to ask you a weird question to begin with, and that is, uh, I want to know where you're going to get three monks to inhabit and serve in the monastery you were refurbishing near Venice. And I'm trying to picture it on the map. The last place I was in Venice fairly recently, but I stayed in Verona. So we would be, Jeannie, my wife, and I would be outside of the town, and we took the train into the city. Um, where are you in relationship, your monastery in relationship to Venice and Verona? Verona's sort of here, Venice is there. Where's the
In the
monastery?
middle. It's in the middle. You were very close. We're
Yeah,
closer to Padua.
sure.
It's on 680 feet above sea level.
Yeah,
It was a complete ruin, 12th century monastery.
yeah,
Looking east, we have the foundation, my foundation has five
sure.
hectares of land. Looking east on a clear day,
Yeah,
you can see the spires of Venice.
lovely,
And you can also, on a clear day, see the Adriatic Sea, the blue
lovely,
of the Adriatic.
lovely.
On on a misty day, as happened this summer when I was there with the construction people and the architect,
Yeah,
very atmospheric. I mean, we've got wild boar, we've got everything there.
sure.
This is quite rough at the moment. And a mist rolled in, really serious mist rolled in.
Mm,
And as this mist rolled in, we were there. And then the owner of the Val San Sibio Historic Garden, which is at the
sure.
foot of this kind of what I will call a mountain, he came up to join us because he sold us the land. This land
Yeah,
belonged to the garden, the Baroque garden. And he said, when he came up, he said, whoa, he said, my wife and I were down at the bottom and
Mm.
you were in a cloud. We watched a cloud move
Yeah.
over the monastery and swallow all of you up.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't a mist, it was a cloud.
How's the project coming? And when do you see? Because you mentioned somewhere else that you had three monks sort of lined up to come in and be there. Where
No,
where where
no,
are they now? Is that true or not?
it is true, but we don't have them. I'm looking for
Ah,
three
you're looking
monks.
for three monks.
If you know any monks,
Yeah.
please. We were originally going to have a hermit
Yeah.
because you need someone. You have to have someone.
Sure.
And I think we're back to a hermit. I was thinking for three because it was a good number. Actually, it
Yeah.
would be best. We have a lovely area for them to
Yeah.
live. We have a nice space, very Spartan, very medieval, but nice. I mean, I would think if someone loved isolation, introspection,
Yeah.
wanted to do the various offices of masses and the
Sure.
liturgy, this would be an ideal place.
Well, if I
And
find you a couple of monks or a hermit that you like and they're residents there, then I want to do what Cosimo de' Medici did. Eventually, I
yeah,
want to have my own cell there.
yes,
And
yeah,
you'll
everybody wants
as
it.
it did it, yeah. And because I think that would be the correct arrangement, because that would be a sort of a good Italian and Catholic way to repay the favor, I think, in line with the whole history of the church. I'm sort of
And also,
joking, but
no,
only
but
partially joking.
only partially. Savonarola in the
Yeah,
San Marco
absolutely.
in
But he didn't need a good
Firenze.
ending. I mean, I don't want to be
Oh,
the
no,
next
no, no,
Savonarola. I
no,
think
no. We're
I
not
don't
going to
feel like
burn
being
him.
hung in the piazza in Florence and
He was
burned. I
burnt
think
too at
that,
the
yeah,
end. Yeah,
it's a very
yeah.
unfortunate ending.
Ah, such is life, right?
Hey,
Sorry.
so anyway, listen, um, here's the problem in talking with you today, and that is I want to discuss the book and give it its due because that's what this program is.
Okay.
But I also want to talk with you about your life. And interestingly enough, not so much about Henry Kissinger, which is, I'm sure, where most people go, but I want to talk to you about the years of caring for your husband. I want to talk about
Oh,
your commitment to the Roman Catholic Church and this monastery, how you got there, your journey. Mine is just give you a quick thumbnail. I come from an evangelical fundamentalist background. I was raised in a kind of a cult mission in the 50s and 60s in Switzerland, of all places, by
ah,
American parents who had come over in 1947 to help kids in the bombed out cities, and then became a real personality cult. And my father became one of the big deals in the evangelical world and so forth. For a while, I was his nepotistic sidekick. I fled that. These days, I call myself an atheist who prays, which is a little bit of a counterintuitive way of describing yourself. But I've been on a definite journey. Um, but one of the great loves of my life is Italy. My first novel's title is Portofino, and the book did
oh,
well enough so that 40 years ago it sold well and all over the place and gave me permission to keep being a writer. I have a relationship with Italy. I have a relationship with the Roman Catholic Church that goes way back, um, although my parents weren't Catholic. Um, your book is amazing because it deals with all the subjects that have become part of my life in terms of a marriage and children and an unexpected pregnancy. How how Hannah deals with that in the book. Her son, who's got many physical difficulties. You've woven all the big themes in. So now here's the problem. We need to get you back to talk about the philosophy of your life while promoting this book. So I want to do both in this, but I want to have a real conversation with you, Gina, about who you are and your life journey, which to me is as interesting as this book. And then I want to promote the book because this is a book that is phenomenally beautifully written, brings up all the
oh.
questions we all ought to be talking about wherever we land on the subject matter. So it's a little bit of a conundrum. So maybe we should just start with the book, but then a bit later in this conversation, get into who you are and your own journey, or we can flip it. What would you rather do? What would you
Well,
rather do? Talk about yourself
they're
first?
they're inextricably linked
I know
because
that.
my life's you say, in the book, how much is of the writer, how much of me is in
Right.
the book. I'm all over the book. I think you, as a writer, you know this.
Of course.
Every person, everything.
Yeah.
it's very,
But I mean,
yeah,
their intimate knowledge
yeah.
of disability, Great Ormond Street Hospital, trial drugs with the FDA, all this stuff. I mean, you've tangled with illness and disability and all sorts of stuff. So let's just start with that. How much of that is related to your own experience? And then I want to talk about the pregnancy, and I want to talk about the choices and decisions she made. How much of that experience? I got my girlfriend Jeannie pregnant when we were 17 and 18. 56 years later, we're still together, three grown children, five grandchildren, and my life revolves around doing childcare for the youngest of those three grandchildren, who are now teenagers, et cetera, et cetera. And that informs everything I do. And so let's start with the bits of the book that are most based in your own life experience. Why is the kind of fulcrum upon which the whole book turns this pregnancy, which somebody throws some cash on the table and tells her to end with an abortion? She keeps the baby, goes forward, and then the story sort of miraculously develops around that. So let's just start with that, because that's what the book hinges on, and I'd like to go there first. Relate it to yourself, relate it to the issues. I'm just fascinated by this because I'm so interested in you.
Well, my life, my faith is absolutely central to my life.
Mm,
And my faith in God, my strict faith in God is central to my life.
mm,
It's not how it always was. In fact, I'll just, this relates to my husband's illness and everything.
mm,
I'm not a Roman Catholic.
mm,
I do not come from that tradition. I'm at present an Anglican,
mm,
because that is the church that I attend, here in England, and I guess it's the Episcopal Church
mm.
in the
Sure.
States. Um, my own family is from the former Eastern Europe. My family is from Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
My father defected from Yugoslavia. My parents were communists. My parents became disappointed in communism,
Mm,
and that is why my father defected, even though he was foreign secretary, secretary of state under Tito in Yugoslavia.
yeah.
Um, I was born in Washington, D.C., while he was executive director of the IMF. He was one of the first executive directors.
Mm,
And he was sent to Washington. I was born in Washington. When I was 4 months old, they were posted back, and I was raised in Yugoslavia,
mm,
in Belgrade. English is my second language. I was raised by two great intellectuals. My
mm, mm,
parents, my father, after he defected, became a professor. My mother became a professor.
mm,
They had a wonderful marriage. They were together for forever until he died, and then she died 3 weeks later.
mm,
But they were atheists,
mm,
and we had every book on our bookshelf. We had an amazing library. We had every book on the shelf except the Bible.
mm.
There was no, there was a lot of talk about traditions. The family was Eastern Orthodox because that's the faith in
Sure.
that region. So they kept the traditions. They kept the traditions of the Slava, where you bake a cake, of the feast day of the saint. They had a
Mm,
relic of the saint, nothing else. And so I went along in this secular world. I always had a need. I always felt like a void.
mm, mm,
I, for faith. I was always going to monasteries. I was standing outside of churches. Um, my father would actually mock the church on Sunday. He would say, "Look at them all. There they are. There they go,
mm,
coming self-righteously out of that church in Syracuse, New York," which is where he became a professor at Syracuse. So that's where we were living. I'll make a long story short. It was when I met my husband, who was um, he was religious. He had faith in God, but he wasn't a very active. He didn't go to church every Sunday,
mm,
but he
mm,
did go. And it was through him that I came to Christ.
mm.
Before we were married, he said, "Have you ever thought of getting baptized?" I said, "Me baptized?" I thought my father would die.
Yeah.
Well, so I did get baptized. I
Well, it's
got,
no wonder there's a big baptism scene in the book
there's a
too.
big baptism. So I did get baptized. I will tell you honestly, that I never told my parents.
Mm,
And I just didn't. You know,
yeah.
what they thought mattered. I knew they would be disappointed. So, um, the baptism came first, and then at some point we were down, he said, at some point in his casual way,
Mm,
he said, have you ever thought of getting confirmed? I
mm,
said, confirmed? Me? And so I went to confirmation class. I never read, you have to understand, I never read the Bible. I can now quote the whole New Testament
mm,
and a lot of the Old. Um, but that's kind of how it began.
mm,
So I waxed in faith, and he remained the same. He was a very busy, very successful businessman.
mm,
And actually, we might talk about that. His his great venture in life was a company, a biotechnology company that discovered, uh, put through clinical trials, and marketed a cancer drug
mm.
that actually saves tremendous number of lives to this day.
Yeah,
But
because
it
your
was,
the sort of ins and outs of your medical knowledge
mm,
remind me of reading Agatha Christie's intricate knowledge of poisons that go back to her nursing in the First World War and her interest in chemistry. And of course, that came
yeah,
from somewhere with her. But I was thinking, we're going to drill down on this a little bit with Gina. This is not in a vacuum here that you went so
no,
in such
no.
detail. Anyway, that's a side issue. But
And his not so much a side issue, but his company is the company that became embroiled in the Martha Stewart insider trading scandal. So
yeah,
there's even more of that, which I put into the book as
yeah.
something else. All right, we fast track, and I'm getting to we fast track. My husband was 22 years older than I was, and we had the most beautiful marriage you can
Mm, mm,
imagine. We were together a quarter of a century, not
mm.
nearly long enough. And he was the love of my life. He was my everything.
Sure.
He had a heart condition, and he developed vascular dementia, which
Mm,
comes from the irregular beating of the heart. He had
mm,
atrial fibrillation, and he became ill. And I decided, no, he's not going into a home. No, no, no. And that was where I truly felt God
mm,
come to us. God came to
mm,
me.
mm.
And I felt God's presence throughout this horrific journey. I mean, he could be quite violent. Vascular dementia is quite violent.
Tough, yeah.
He he didn't know, if he knew it was me or if he knew it was one of the carers, he wouldn't have. But he would get so frustrated, so frightened. And
Mm,
I prayed and prayed and prayed. And then we stayed here. The church is around the corner. And I began going every single day, and I
mm,
would
mm,
pray. And I really felt God supporting us. I felt
mm,
God supporting us. And I had I'll fast track forward to the end. I had a particular prayer where I said, please, God, because he would have these fits. And you know what dementia is, where
mm,
he didn't know where he was. And he would get into a panic, a terrible
mm,
panic. And I thought, oh, what if he'll have a heart attack and that's how
mm,
he'll
mm,
go? Because he had a pacemaker by then. I thought that's how it'll be. And I prayed, dear God, don't let him go like that. Don't let him go in fear, in a fit, frightened, terrified.
yeah, yeah.
Please, I pray for a peaceful death. Grant
Mm,
him a peaceful death. Well,
mm,
that's exactly what God did.
mm, mm,
He died quite suddenly. I guess he had a chest infection, and one morning he simply didn't wake up. He was sleeping and sleeping. And it was the only morning he didn't have his breakfast. And I didn't know what was going on. And he kept
yeah.
sleeping and sleeping and sleeping. And then I noticed he wasn't breathing.
Mm,
And all of us in that room, the carers and the priest who came, we really did feel the presence of the Holy Spirit
mm,
in
mm,
that room. And the sun was shining, and it was beginning of spring, and the windows were open. And it was a beautiful death.
mm, mm.
And
When
then that
when
is
when
when
was that, by the way?
uh,
What year
it
was
was
that?
on March 31st, 2014.
2014. And how
2014.
how did his illness, your marriage, and your choices in terms of career, because I know you left what you were doing and helped
Yes,
take care of him. How
yes,
did
I
that
did.
all overlap? Just to back up a little bit, how did that overlap your involvement with Henry Kissinger, if at all? Was that all much
It
earlier?
didn't. It didn't. I had to put all that, my 20 years with Henry had to be put aside to care
Yeah.
for Bob. It was an
Because I
impossible
forget his
situation.
trajectory, Henry Kissinger's trajectory, but I'm trying to work. I'm very bad at math, but in working the dates out in my head, I'm just wondering if you had ever had an opportunity to talk with Kissinger about some of your own faith journey, or was that in a completely different
Oh,
area?
no, no. It had begun. It had begun. And he had his own faith journey.
Yeah,
And
which
he
I sort
didn't.
of got hints of a little bit through,
Mm,
just knowing a little bit about Nixon and so forth. But I'm wondering
mm.
how that overlapped with him and then his faith journey as you understand it. I know this is totally off the subject, but it's too
No,
interesting
no,
not
he
to drill
told
down on.
me, and I mean, we worked together. We worked late into the night. He lived
Yeah,
next door to us in New York with our pencils and our pens. And he said that if he could do it again, he said he would have become a Roman Catholic.
yeah,
But he said, the Jewishness was more powerful. And in the end, I heard that when he was it was in a synagogue that his funeral took place.
yeah,
And it's just his mother. I knew his mother, Paula, and it was a very tight Jewish family structure.
sure.
And he said, I have no choice. Um, but I believe that he did believe in God
Yeah,
because his favorite quote, his hero was Bismarck, right?
yeah,
His great hero was, and his favorite quote from Bismarck was that the greatest thing that any statesman can do
yeah.
is to walk for a little while at the feet of God and grab hold of the bottom of his mantle
Mm, mm,
and hold on to it for a little
yeah,
while. That was
yeah,
his best favorite quote. But back to my husband's death, I decided because I decided, and it's a question of decision, as you
mm,
know, that I had to thank God. I had to devote the rest of my life to God. And this monastery arose out of that. I
yeah,
wanted to find a place where I could bring what I had received
mm,
to other people that they might receive.
mm,
And I thought that what I would do is build a prayer garden in England where they have the most beautiful gardens in the
sure.
world. Never happened.
Yeah,
The English, the Church of England, no interest. No, I mean, excuse me, but pretty faithless. No,
yeah,
they didn't want it. And here I was bringing them funds. I was bringing them anything they needed. And I said, there are so many redundant churches all over, lying in woodland paths.
yeah,
Let me restore one, build a cross, and I had the idea for a path of salvation.
mm,
And no, no, well, again, God took me to Italy. I went to look for a garden.
mm,
I went to visit a garden. I was sent to the wrong garden. The driver couldn't speak English, and he took me to the wrong garden.
yeah.
And I found this place.
That's good. And when
So
was
that's
that? How many years ago was that?
20. That was, I decided to establish a garden in 2017. I established a
Yeah,
foundation, and I met Armando, who owns the large garden of Val San Zibio, in
yeah,
2019.
yeah,
Then COVID came, and it took a long time to get planning permission, to get
mm,
permission from the government. It just went on and on. And then we did. And the monastery buildings are 4 months away from completion. The
yeah. And
buildings.
when was the first the buildings there that you're restoring? I'm a little hazy on that. The details about that. How much is new construction? How much is restoration?
Well, we found, I mean, there were trees growing from the inside. It had been an agricultural site
Yeah,
for the last 100 years. Before that, it hasn't been used since about 1400.
yeah,
And we found a lot of the original bricks. And then we filled in with a company, a factory
sure.
locally that makes them the old way, leaves them out to dry.
Yeah,
Everything. We discovered the original fireplace. We discovered the original rosary window in the chapel.
mm,
It's a small place. It's a rustic, small. It's not grand. It's really small.
mm,
Um, but it looks out in four directions, and it's in the Eugenia Hills, which is where it's like a Brazilian rainforest type of
sure.
climate, and it is a national park, which is why it
Hmm.
took so long to get permission to
Get the
do
permission.
anything.
Yeah,
Because there are no houses around. You just look out over valleys, you see Venice in the distance, you see forests, the garden below, the
mm,
Baroque garden. They have the thermal hot springs. Petrarch's house is a
sure.
mile and a half away from us, the Aqua Petrarca and a medieval village, and
Mm.
that's it. Nothing else.
Yeah, that's amazing. Just a whole story in itself. Now, before we get into your book, I think you're working on another project that maybe draws a little bit on some of the experiences with your husband or other parts of your life. I don't want to make you talk about something that's in the works, but I'm just curious.
No, there is no other. It's only the monastery.
But are you working on another writing project?
Oh, well, I've just finished it. I've
Okay,
finished a
so
book
then we can talk
that
about it a
is,
little bit. And
yes,
what's that all about?
that is about my father's defection, which was
Okay,
front page New York Times at the time.
yeah.
It begins with that, and then it veers off into its own territory.
And we're
It's
talking another novel.
it's another novel set in the Cold War,
That's really
and
fascinating.
it's
Yeah.
really the story of myself. It
Yeah.
is more the story of myself, and a lot of it takes place where you are. Part of it takes place in Cambridge, part of it in
Yeah.
London, a great deal in Dubrovnik.
So is this the
Um,
50s and the 60s? What are we talking about?
60s. It takes place in the 60s, but the backstory is in the 50s.
Yeah.
It's
When
with
you when you talk,
Tito's rise to power.
yeah, in looking at where Snowbirds play, which is Gina's novel here, just give me one thing here again. This isn't my forte math, but I was trying to figure out the years this book takes place in. When do you set, what years is this set in? I read it as this, maybe the 70s, the 80s.
You mean, of course, Snowbirds plays 1991.
91. Okay. So the 80s is
91.
close. And
Yeah,
that's when you're setting it in that year.
I'm setting it in that year.
Yeah,
That's sort of
okay.
the end of the golden age of Palm Beach. The
Yeah,
old
the end of
guard,
Palm Beach,
way
right?
to the new guard. Yeah.
Yeah, and the contrast, of course, with Palm Beach and the society life there relates a little bit to another novel that I read. I haven't interviewed the author yet, but I hope to sometime. Called Eurotrash by Christian Kracht, who's a Swiss writer who sets his book in not Palm Beach, but Switzerland. And there's a connection, as you well know, with the kind of people hanging around with money. Um, and his novel is told from first person, as a first person narrative from the son of a very wealthy mother who inherited all her money from her father and her husband's Nazi
Mm,
connections in
mm,
Germany.
mm,
But it's
mm.
also set in a context in which the story takes place with, surrounded by wealthy people, some of whom don't have much of a conscience, if you can put it that way. And then, of course, your book, in a way, I think is better in that you contrast your central character and her decisions. So I want to talk about the sort of philosophy that runs through the book. We've talked about your faith a little bit, but let's talk about how surprising it was to be reading a book where Snowbirds play, and then all of a sudden you run into your central character and you realize, no, what this book is really about is her choices and the kind of person she will be and how she relates to her son and how she fights for her son. And then this
Mm.
kind of unlikely scenario. So let's pretend I haven't read the book, and I have. I showed it to you before. Here's all my little notes
Here's your
and lots of
testament.
pages
Yeah.
underlined. Like
Yeah.
here, for instance, I have a little section that I just wrote next to it. Lovely. Okay, I just
Oh,
want you to see, I'm not joking.
or I
Lovely.
know, I know. I trust you
Okay.
implicitly.
It was hard to believe that after all, Hannah would come to the ball, yet here she was, standing across the ballroom in a family circle that included Louisa Caulfield, Dixie Wainwright, and the Sloanes. She wore a midnight blue silk gown, cut on the bias, her hair braided and pinned up around her head like a chaplet. Philip traced with his eyes the nuances of Hannah's body inside the gown, blushing when he realized what he was doing. Small and statuesque, wearing a single strand of pearls with no makeup. Out of all the women in the ballroom, no one seemed more beautiful. Well, I want to tell you something. Your power of description, which I read that just to show a tiny little tithe of what is in store for people who read this book. You're a beautiful writer. So um,
Thank you.
let's just talk about the writing first in this book. Here you are writing this novel. You know about writing. You've edited Henry Kissinger. Um, I know this will sound like a kind of a suck up, strange question, but what makes you a good writer? Because not all editors are good writers.
Mm,
And people who go to Harvard and study writing don't usually wind up as good writers. They are into the craft or they become an editor or the vice president of a
mm.
publishing company, but your background doesn't guarantee you can write. So where has this Gina been hiding? because this is
Gee,
really phenomenal book. And that's an odd question. I'm sorry to ask it that way, but
no,
it's from my heart.
it's a really prescient. I mean, it's a very profound question because since I've been a little girl, I considered myself a writer. I think I began writing my
Yeah,
first short story when I was 7 or something, and I always considered myself a writer. But then my life took me away from that, took me further and further away. The
yeah,
careers, the struggle for an early marriage that lasted impossibly 13 years,
yeah,
at the end of which I didn't finish my PhD at Harvard and I had to get a job. And
yeah,
so I struggled. I had no money, I had no funds. I struggled. I went to New York. Uh, Everything conspired to keep me from writing. And then the 20 years with Kissinger were actually very difficult because he's very Germanic. I mean, he writes beautifully and he's a brilliant thinker and writer. But his verbs are at the end of a sentence, as you know, in German. They are, probably,
mhm,
as you know. And his sentences can be nearly a page long. And working with him was very different from how shall I put this? It was more kind of declamatory writing, and
mm,
also a lot of it rubbed off on me, so that I became a more analytic writer.
yeah,
And really, all creativity was leached out of me in a way. I've never said this because I've never thought about it until you
mm,
just asked me.
mm,
And after I stopped, when Bob was getting very unwell, it took me, I began dabbling in writing,
mm.
and nothing would come of it because you just sit down and then a carer would come running
Sure,
in
sure.
and I drop it. But that was practice in getting away from that intellectual
Mm, mm.
textbook type, highly philosophical analysis of history
Yeah,
and geopolitics and so forth. That was a weaning process that lasted about another 6, 7 years.
mm,
It wasn't, it makes me very sad to say this, but it wasn't until my husband died
mm.
and I had suddenly this time that I never, you just never had for anything when someone is ill at home and you're juggling schedules and
Sure.
that I began to write and it was really hard.
Mm,
This novel did not come easily. It
mm.
was sentences and words and finding the right word. And I have these writers that I love and whom I hold in such high esteem. And I would write something and I would think, no, this isn't as good as that. It just isn't good. And
Sure.
so rip it up and go back and go back and go back.
Mm,
I can't even tell you what I went through, getting up at 5 in the morning
mm.
and being at this book. And of course, the second one just flowed.
Yeah, of
Once
course.
you got it, it's you've written
Yeah,
4 books, as you say, plus nonfiction. Um, so it's like the original Gina came out, but it took a lot of purging and purifying and work, really
yeah,
hard work. How many times can you look at a sentence and say it better?
yeah. No,
Yeah, yeah,
totally
you
understand.
understand.
I
Yeah,
totally get it.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good answer to a good
A
to
good
what I think
question.
was a good
Excellent.
question
Yeah,
in
yeah.
trying to find you in there. And I think people are very suspicious of people who come late to something, or it's like my wife and I when we go out for a pizza and a glass of wine somewhere, people will say, "Oh, aren't you a cute couple?" As in a kind of, this is because we're older, we're quote still together, and they find that charming. I think that what people who listen to this podcast have to understand is that, and I know this is going to sound strange, but this is a really good novel. And it's, you're saying to yourself, well, here's someone who comes to writing a novel late. And this will sound odd, but being a praying person, even though I call myself an atheist, I pray that you are given the time to write all those novels which are there, because you're a really good writer.
Oh,
And
thank you.
your education didn't spoil that. And that's unusual,
No, no, no.
because somehow you've put that aside. And what I think is surprising about this book is the way, when it overlaps with my experiences in life, like the first time Hannah feels the flutter of the little fetus in her belly moving. I relate to being a teenager with an inconvenient pregnancy in my 18-year-old girlfriend, but feeling the first flutter of movement inside her. And, you have cut to the chase on what the heart does in all these circumstances. And I've faced illness. By the way, it was interesting. You had polio in your book. I have a severely atrophied left leg. I had polio when I was 2 in 1954. My parents sort of skipped the vaccine. We were on the Ile-de-France traveling back to Europe from the US. Um, I get that. I understand illness from that point of view. I get the inconvenient pregnancy, and I get all these points. And I must say, where you have the courage to touch the emotion and get away from an intellectual approach, which is surprising. You're Kissinger's editor, you're overeducated, if anything. And yet here
Yeah.
you turn out to write with a kind of pure emotion, which cuts through everything and gets to the reader, which I found quite amazing, actually. Being told this was the first novel or that you've come to this at this stage of your life, it's overwhelming. It's really a good piece of work. Now I'm going to ask you to read something here, if you don't mind fuddling around with your book a little bit.
No.
For me, it starts on page 157 with the words, I see Mrs. Vine's eyes narrowed as she studied the priest's face. If you can find that on what in the paperback is 157,
I'm
which
looking.
is about 6 pages into the Gold Digger's Tale. 1, 2, 3,
Oh,
4,
it's
5, 6,
different
maybe 7
pagination.
pages into the Gold Digger's
I
Tale.
Let me get a paperback.
Well,
It's
you
right
don't
here.
have to unless you.
No, it'll be easy. It's right here.
Okay,
There's
and
one.
I'll keep talking a little bit while you're reading this. Um, I just want you to read this passage here, starting page 157, all the way to the end of the chapter. Actually, the next chapter is battle scenes, and so basically, it's the last 3 pages of the chapter before battle scenes that starts in 157 with the words, I see Mrs. Vine's
Yeah,
eyes
I've got
narrowed.
it all the
Okay,
way
so if
to
you can read from there
159.
to the
Yeah,
end
to
of the chapter.
159. All right, I shall. By the way, Frank, you and I are the same age. I just did my math.
I wasn't going to ask, and all I
Exact
can
same age.
say, okay, so now I have to go there because now we're into this sort of uncharted
Right,
territory, and
right.
I'm old enough to say what I want. But looking at you, un vero Madonna, is what the Italians are going to say when they see you.
Well,
Molto bello, un vero Madonna, because you carry yourself, like a grande dame from some period of history where people had real self-confidence, and it's very refreshing to talk to somebody like that.
oh, Frank, you made my day.
I hope
In
so, because it's sincerely meant. It was like,
well,
I've so enjoyed the book, and meeting you in person, sitting here in front of that Japanese screen in your London apartment. I'm blown away because of your presence. And like I say, it's not hard to imagine you working with Henry Kissinger for 20 years, but where this novel comes from is why we're talking, because we're trying to figure that out. So please read the passage.
so I see Mrs. Vine's eyes narrowed as she studied the priest's face. It had, she thought, especially when he wanted something, the same star quality of Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments. Consider it done, Leopold, she announced after letting him stew for a minute or two. There's nothing quite so uplifting as a good old-fashioned miracle, now and then. Just tell me to whom to address the letter and the amount of money you think you'll need. The priest continued to fidget, trying without success to eat all that Mrs. Vine had heaped on his plate. I've never understood, he said, brushing the crumbs from his cassock, how someone can donate thousands of dollars to an institution they never visit. Oh, I do that sort of thing quite a lot, she said, refilling the priest's glass. And I do, of course, believe in the church, only not in that church, so long as that vicar remains in charge. You've been at Gethsemane long enough, Leopold, she added by way of explanation, to have more than an inkling as to why I should feel the way I do. He gave a helpless look. The proclivities of the long-sitting head vicar were another open secret that Father Leo, as a relatively new associate priest, could do nothing about. No matter how inadequate the church, he said at length, it is our main link with the divine. Priests are worldlings too, you know. They stumble and fall, but those who truly repent deserve to be forgiven, as the Father forgives his children. Oh, I always forgive. But in my long experience of such things, most people want forgiveness without repentance, Mrs. Vine reflected. Are you quite certain, she asked, that you have chosen the right profession for a man of your convictions? Father Leo reddened, fixating on the last half-eaten pierogi at the side of his plate. It has never occurred to me to doubt my calling, although he hesitated, knotting the embroidered napkin round his fingers. I confess that I feel closest to God when the church is empty.
Mm.
Oh, never mind, Mrs. Vine murmured. You are still young and will come to feel a great deal more one with the world. But I don't want to feel one with the world, Father Leo exploded. He half rose from his seat, beads of sweat erupting along his hairline. I want to be content with nothing, like the Desert Fathers. If only I were younger, thought Mrs. Vine, I could cure him of this nonsense. My dear man, she said philosophically, your calling is to be a pastor, not a martyr.
Mm.
Then it dawned on her that Leopold might be one of those celibate priests. The island is hardly what I would call an ideal place for desert fathers, she said, and the social season is like one of my feral cats in heat. Turning dead serious, she said, have you considered asking the bishop to move you to a different parish? Leopold shook his head. It's no use, he said, flattening the wrinkled napkin against his knee. I may be a pastor, but where, I ask, is my flock? I'm like the mendicants of old who begged for alms,
Mm.
but instead of alms, I only beg people to believe. Believe in you? In God? Feeling another wave of affection, the old lady wrapped her thick arm around him. Beware of the devil, Leopold, she said, giving him a squeeze. My Irish grandmothers used to say that one can always find the devil lurking among the church pews. Satan lusts for saints, not sinners, who you must admit he's already got by the throat. Trust me on this, Leopold. Satan will attempt to defeat you through the very thing you cherish most.
Mm.
Father Leo hung his head. For nearly a minute he said nothing, his eyes burning as he stared at water trickling from a pair of marble putti, one at each side of the fountain. Hannah Caulfield is an extraordinary woman, he blurted. Pure and good and selfless, like Our Lady. Mrs. Vine tightened her grip, wondering if Leopold was slightly mad or in love. Having been acquainted with a number of priests, she had yet to find one that wasn't suffering. Thank heaven, she thought, that women are spared from entering such a profession. From what I know of life, those who try to have sole possession of things they have no right to always end up losing in the end.
Mm.
And what is it you think I'm trying to have sole possession of? Father Leo asked accusingly. Of God, and perhaps also of Hannah Caulfield.
I love it. Let's pause for a
In,
minute and just talk about Hannah Caulfield. Just talk about the trajectory of her through the book. And I know we're not going to tell the whole story. You've got to read the book. And by the way, we have a book club called It Has to Be Read, and I'd like to make this our March offering. So
oh,
we would do it
great.
sooner, but we have some other books in the stream. March
Sure.
isn't too far away. Um, so we will get back in touch with you on that. And Ernie, my producer, will be talking to you after I sign off when we're done this discussion. But we'd like to make it our March, one of our books in March, because I'd like to give it a whole nother set of plugs. And maybe we can take the advantage of that and talk to you again about other aspects of your life and work and everything else. But let me jump in and just say, one of the things that I need to discuss is her. Let's talk about Hannah. Where does Hannah come from? And I don't mean to pin you down, but the trajectory of her character is both something that would live in history. When I think of a saint, in a way, her story's been told in various stories of saints in some ways, but also must live in yourself in some way out of your own experiences. So how does that character arise in this book? And talk about you're not giving anything away if you talk about the trajectory of her story, because I've always already talked about her disabled son and her pregnancy and so forth and so on. So you can talk about that, but where does she as a character come from? Point one. And I was going to say, well, I'm old, so you'll have to remind me, but now you're telling me you're my age, although et cetera. But I think your mind works better than mine. If I forget the
Oh
next
no.
part, remind me of that as well. And that is, we want to talk about Hannah, but the other thing I want to talk about is the way you write about religion and the priests and other people in the book who are religious figures. I write about religion and I just think it's remarkably good. You really nailed it. So let's talk about that second, but let's talk about Hannah. Where does she come from?
You know, I don't know where she comes from.
Hmm.
She comes out of left field. Um, there's there's really no me in Hannah.
Well,
I'll have
she's
to tell
very
you that.
real to me. She's very real
Yeah,
to me. When I finished your book, it's like I totally buy Hannah Caulfield.
yeah,
She's completely real to me.
fascinating. Yeah. And I mean, I've never had children. I've never been pregnant.
Hmm.
Her experiences during this period of time just kind of came to me. She did a number of things, Hannah, that totally surprised me. This is the
Hmm.
first time, and I think in all my writing, the only time that a character absolutely surprised me. And my editor, I mean, when she was, for instance, that scene where she burns the baptismal certificate in on the kitchen stove,
Hmm.
that was like, what? What did she just do? And as a character, I don't know where she came from.
Hmm.
She's a composite of things that might have happened.
Yeah.
Um, she's her strength as a very young girl to have this child
Yeah.
in a period of time where, I mean, everyone had told her to abort that baby, from her
Yeah.
mother, her parents, to
Yeah.
pretty much everyone. Um, and that's kind of what was happening in the late 70s,
Of
on the
course.
campus
Yeah.
and everything. And I don't know where her decision kind of comes from.
Hmm.
One thing I did want to say about the book is that um, each of the, we're talking about characters. There are no really evil characters in this
Hmm.
book. They're
Hmm.
all just human. There is one, though, in my mind, and that is
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
poet
Sure.
who dies, the father of Philip, the
Yeah.
seducer of Hannah, the
Yeah.
father of the little boy.
He's a
He's a
nasty piece
really
of work.
nasty piece of work.
Yeah.
And and that nastiness echoes as often evil does. It echoes through generations, it echoes through families, through
Yeah.
societies. And so he's really, I mean, the only one who is that bad.
Hmm.
Um, and he's not even present. It's because he's gone. He dies before it really the action takes place. So Hannah is sort of my faith in young women, my faith in I grew up in the era of feminism, and although
Hmm.
I wasn't a feminist, I believed in women's rights at a time when there
Sure.
were none, if you remember. And I believe that one of our rights as women was to make Hannah's decisions that go
Yeah.
against the grain.
Yeah.
Whereas today, it's so different.
Yeah.
If you're not in the groove of the thinking, you're out.
Yeah.
Um, and and I suppose that is the same thing, maybe in a way. Yeah, she was really out of that whole groove and out of. So I can't answer that question. You really made me think, and maybe by March I will be able to answer it. But
And so
I'm
now I've even
Hannah.
remembered my
No,
second half of the question, which is great
yeah.
for me because usually Ernie has to now send me a text in the note section saying we were going to ask, but he didn't have to this time. So I,
Oh,
I also want to know about the next bit that I asked you about, and that was in your own life experience. Obviously, you've met priests, you've thought religious thoughts, you've been reading the Bible, though you didn't have it as a girl, et cetera, et cetera. But I read quite a few things. I'd say out of the three books I read a week for this podcast, I would say a third of them are by people like Hannah's Children about by Pakaluk on why she had all these children. She teaches at Catholic University of America, or The Kingdom, the Power and the Glory by Tim Alberta, about what's happened to pastors in America in the Trump years, blah, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or Matthew Barzun, The Power of Giving Away Power, who is Obama's ambassador to the UK and the chief fundraiser for the Democratic Party and so forth. But all of these people have some experience of either religion or a moral vision of their lives and so on that comes into their books. And I think they show up on my podcast because, having come out of a very, um, you know, important, I guess you could say, or at least significant religious background myself, and having written some successful books like my memoir, Crazy for God, about that background, I attract publishers who ask me for blurbs on books that have anything to do with this subject. And I'm honestly, once again, not just making a compliment, but you write about the priestly class of people and their struggles and what they're like. I'm the son of a preacher. In this area, I know what I'm talking about. And I have known many people who are in that line of work. And you really nail it. I mean, you get it. So where does that come from? Have you had a
Wow.
particular friendship with a series of priests or pastors? Where does this
Yes.
understanding come from? And
Yes.
this is not Henry Kissinger, okay? So whatever
No.
that life experience is,
No.
and it's not Harvard either. So where does
No.
that come from?
It comes from my experience with the church, and in particular during the period of my husband's illness.
Yeah,
One priest who actually has just had a serious altercation with, who's left the church even just yesterday. It's a no-win situation to be a priest. I
yeah,
mean, it's you're either a saint or a sinner.
yeah,
And the saints, it takes a long time to identify a saint. Usually you have to have been gone a while. I don't
right.
mean by the number of miracles they performed, but by what they accomplished, and what their example in the world.
Yeah,
And, and I have no faith in the organized church, either the Catholic, the Anglican, or any. I'm so sorry to say.
yeah,
I believe in the strict authority of the Bible, and these people are uncomfortable people. They are John the Baptist. They are crazy people often.
yeah,
Jesus was a very, very difficult man. A very, problematic man.
yeah,
That is where the faith resides. And I know he left the church as my body and all that, but it comes from experience. I've known a number of priests. I've been on pilgrimages. I belong to I don't know how many churches in Venice, in Florence, in Palm Beach, in New York, three different churches here in London,
yeah,
two or three. But there's one I'm very close to, and we now have a wonderful, wonderful minister,
yeah.
uh, wonderful
But I'm glad to
congregation.
hear that, because I think one of the diseases that I grew up with, and it is a sort of a sickness, because I came out of a very fundamentalist evangelical background. And, we were the church. And as I joke sometime, we weren't sure about anybody else and got to become a narrower and narrower kind of little group. But, we had the faith. And then, of course, I left that. But that kind of hunger to find the true body
Yeah,
remained.
yes,
And so,
yeah.
for about 25, 30 years, I went to a Greek Orthodox church. And I'm not saying
Ah,
that wasn't a good experience, but I've come to a very similar place as you, in that I have a great deal of respect for priests and for people in that line of work. And there are individual church congregations that I like, but any idea that you're going to find the place, the denomination, this is a very Calvinist idea. Of course, the Roman Catholics had the same thing, so did the Greek Orthodox, and so on. The good people within those denominational settings and historic settings are the ones who also recognize, this is where I happen to go to church and worship, but they don't hold out where they're going as the place in which salvation's found because it's the correct institution. And it sounds to me that's where you're at.
absolutely. But I do love the liturgy. What I love about the Anglican Church is I love the music.
Yeah,
I love the chants. I love the incense. I love the form. That I love the mystery, and of course the Greek and Eastern Orthodox.
yeah,
There's this incredible mystery of where the
yeah,
altar is.
yeah,
You do feel in the threshold of something,
yeah,
something, and that if you can discern it, you can bring it into yourself.
yeah.
But that's not where it is found.
Yeah. Well, I get the Anglican connection because when I was a little boy at age 10, I was put in a boarding school in Sussex in Linfield, which is near Haywards Heath on the train
Hmm.
line to Brighton. So I was there for 3 years, and then I was in a British, what the British call a public school, which is a swanky private boys' high school up in North Wales that I then ran away from when I was 15 and a half, almost 16. But I was in British boys' upper crusty Anglican, schools. There was chapel every day in the morning and the evening and so forth and so on. And I've always had a great fondness for that. And I get that, but uh, in sort of my own journey, I've sort of come to a similar place as you, um, slightly different, but with a recognition of the value of all institutions. I mean, without those, we wouldn't have anything to function, even if we leave them, whether it's governmental
Exactly.
institutions or
Exactly.
whatever else. It can't all
Exactly.
be individualistic. So how do you
No.
kind of balance that in your own life? Because obviously, Kissinger, the US government, State Department, we need these things. But on the other hand, from a Christian point of view, anyway, philosophically, all this is it's all going to pass. And none of this lasts in the end. On the other hand, we can't make our way through life without institutions or any kind of formal association. So how do you balance this at this point of your life?
This is very difficult because all the institutions in every country that I go to, except Italy, are broken. They're
Yeah.
broken. And this has never really happened before, quite so
Now, when you say
simultaneously in
accept
every
Italy,
country.
what do you mean? I'm interested.
Well, Italy, it's surprisingly, under this Giorgia Meloni,
Sure.
they maintain their rituals. The
Yeah.
people I talk to, they're grounded. They're grounded in their daily going to market, in
Yeah.
their preparation of the 3 hour midday meal,
Yeah.
in their relationship with their families,
Yeah.
in their faith. I do love in Venice, and every corner is a Madonna on every little,
Sure.
and it's just reassuring that these Madonnas are there. I
Yeah.
don't, um, but my own opinion, maybe we shouldn't really go there, but I mean, these are the last days. You look in the Bible and you look at in the book of the Apocalypse. I mean, these really now we're at the end.
I'm
I
not
mean,
sure
really
that's the
now.
case in terms of any timeline
I mean, I
because
don't know how long it'll be. It could be
yeah, I mean,
still
the
centuries.
civilizations come and go and wind down, and that's another discussion. But on the other
That's
hand,
true.
you've got a
That's
new
true.
novel
Like
coming
Rome.
out, so you obviously have
Yeah.
some faith in the future. By the way, have you sold the second book?
I haven't approached anyone. I'm always very private with it. I haven't even looked for
A
a
publisher?
publisher or I mean, I have an agent, but I'm not sure I'll use her.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I haven't. And I've got my current publisher who's wonderful. I adore him, but I haven't discussed it with him. So I'll see what happens. I
Well,
don't
I'm
know.
glad that you're talking about it with me. Let me wrap this up by saying two things. First of all, when I do sign off, please stick around for a minute and talk with Ernie,
Okay.
my
All
producer,
right.
so that we can make sure to connect all the dots to your
All right.
web page and all that kind of stuff. And then the other thing I'm going to tell you about is a project that I've been working on for the last 7 years, which is a nonfiction work called The Gospel of Zip. And basically,
Of
it's very much up your street because the subtitle is a canine human love story exploring why most dogs and a few humans live joyful lives. And actually, it's very much in line with your character Hannah in terms of what she discovers about her own life. It's kind of a bit of my journey, and discovering that it's the quality of the human relationships. For instance, the one you had with your husband, including the caregiving years when he's giving you a very hard time. But
oh, that was
in
the
the end,
best
that's
years of
that's
life.
what yeah, that's what your life is
Yeah,
about.
that was the best time.
Yeah, and I think
Horrible
maybe
time.
as people
Horrible,
who
but
are a little bit older, I don't go, say we're old because you certainly are not, and years
and you are
wise,
not.
people live for a bit. Thank you. But the fact of the matter is, I think, just to go someplace else at the end of this discussion that comes out of the book I've written, but also out of your book, we have something to share about the core values of life with a younger generation that no one's
Uh,
telling anybody.
no, no,
And it's a
no.
tragedy because staring down
It's a
into a
travesty.
phone or the net level of violence in entertainment, or children being groomed through online porn, and that's now sex
Exactly.
education.
I know.
Looking at it from the point of view, and I'm only 73, but nevertheless, in the arc of my life, I never pictured a period of history like our own in which the things that I always grew up taking for granted, which was, oh, people will fall in love, they'll have relationships, they'll have connection to other humans. This stuff is fading away in terms of a younger
I know.
generation.
That's what I mean about the last days. It really is fading away.
Yeah. And it certainly will. Forget the apocalyptic vision. We'll have it as theological discussion sometime. But right now, let's just say that, if no one's connecting to other people and everyone is in an isolation booth, the most basic medical science tells you, to put it in non-Christian terms, evolution wants lonely people dead because they don't connect and they don't contribute. And so we've evolved
Exactly. Hmm.
to
Hmm.
have relationships or die.
Exactly.
So this is a
Exactly.
suicide mission we're on.
Well, it's a form of genocide, kind
It
of a
is.
strange form of,
It's a
yes.
sort of
No,
a
absolutely.
voluntary genocide of
Yeah.
not connecting to other people.
And I have come to the conclusion, and I said this
Yeah.
to the vicar at church, and there was a group of us talking. Everyone has come to the same conclusion. I wonder if you have. The Antichrist, the last one,
Hmm.
it's going to be AI. It has to be,
Well, it might well be because
which is a projection of our own
yeah,
egos, you know.
but let's put it this way. We're certainly in a period of history where you begin to question how long you can go when I know you were saying you didn't have children, but it's not like, I'm not putting it into that. But when you're in a period of time when everything, including entertainment and the actual technology and the algorithms that drive us all down angry rabbit holes where we hate each other and won't communicate, this is a recipe for civilizational genocide,
Suicide, suicide, which is a
suicide.
form of genocide
It
turned toward
is.
ourselves.
And you use
Not,
strong terms, but I buy that.
I know. We have to use the strong terms.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're burning that wick very. I don't know where this is going to lead,
Well,
honestly. But
speaking of which, and I'm breaking my own rule here, but what do you
yeah,
think Henry Kissinger, your old pal who you worked with all those years,
yeah.
would say in terms of a snapshot of this moment in time when it comes to, the loss of relationships, the inability of people to connect? I mean, a real challenge to the whole civilizational assumption
Yeah.
that we thought kind of bound all of the human race together no longer does in terms of Western culture, certainly, or the more developed countries in the East. I mean, we're in a very new place. I mean, how would he see that? Because these
Oh,
are the
he
things he
would be
thought about.
scandalized. He would be scandalized. He
Yeah,
would be absolutely, yeah. I mean, he apparently, which I didn't read, and is very extreme old age, as in 100 years old.
yeah,
He co-authored some books on artificial intelligence
sure.
and the coming alteration of the world and so on. Um, but I hate to say it, but he made a lot of this possible by his policies, but we won't get into that. You
Well,
know, he would be
just give me a
scandalized
thumbnail of
by
what
it.
you're talking about. What do you mean by that? I'm
Well,
interested.
you know, I rewrote and edited I don't know how many articles, oh, in a period of, I don't know, 15 years, because we had a bi-weekly column for the LA Times Syndicate. So
Yeah,
it had to be something pertinent, and it was newspapers all over the world in that syndicate. Um, and you know, he pushed the New World Order, the New World Order, the
yeah,
new, and I had no idea what it. I was a medievalist. I studied medieval literature. Beowulf was. I wrote a thesis on ritual lamentations from the dead, from Gilgamesh to Beowulf. I mean, you know, I'm out of it, and I'm reading about a new world order. What is a new world order? What? And now I realize we are in the new world order now.
yeah,
And he had a lot of business contacts, and you know, he liked getting paid. He liked making money.
hmm,
Um, it was very important to him, and he wrote things and said things that I wouldn't say I'm not sure he believed, but they were convenient.
hmm,
And I think a lot of that has brought us to where we are. I think he would regret that.
hmm.
But
But looking at him and your work with him as part of, and I'm not, the term may be wrong, but the old order, what we all assumed would last forever. I never assumed I'd live in this period of history where the
Me
phone
neither.
would take a whole generation and run them into the ground, where,
I know.
tech bro billionaires would be
Oh,
having, 16 children with six different women
oh,
through IVF fertilization, checking for embryo IQ statistics and this kind of thing. I mean, this is real Brave New World stuff. This is
yeah.
1984, and
And
we're
did
here.
you know? And you know that episode where Putin and Xi were
Yeah,
talking about they would live forever.
yeah.
They weren't kidding.
No, they
And
wouldn't.
they were sending a message out because there are no, they said it was a micro, something mic, something, a
Sure.
microphone. No, no. I mean, they were sending a message, hey, we're going to be around and you better watch out.
Yeah, and
And
that
they
and,
never
and and
planned
whether
to
that
do that.
happens or not, that is certainly their ambition.
That's insane.
It's insane.
Insanity.
Yeah,
But of
and the funny
course,
thing is, when you look at Peter Thiel and
mm,
Elon Musk and these other guys, they're talking the same way. We're
they are.
breeding children to populate Mars, to continue the human race with my own children. I mean, this is really off the wall stuff.
It is.
Yeah, so I buy the end times vibe from you, not so much the theology. We can argue about that, or you must give your vicar a hard time. I can see these guys must say, "Oh man, here she comes." What is she going to tell me now?
No, I'm remarkably, no, I'm not like Mrs. Vine with poor Leopold. No,
Okay,
I keep my peace. Yes.
yeah, you
I
keep your peace, but in your head, you're doing some thinking.
Well, yeah, here in England, they are all doing a lot of thinking in this
Yeah.
particular little parish. And I hope in America too.
Well, the UK
I
is in a bit of its own mess, isn't it?
oh, horrible mess. This is worse than America. This
Yeah.
is where we're heading next if we're not careful. This is very bad.
Be
Very bad.
specific a little bit.
The infrastructure, the institutions are failing. The NHS is broken.
Yeah.
Um, there's a tube strike constantly. Everybody's on strike. There are knife attacks all the time. There are gangs. I mean, I like nice things, but when I go out, I dress so that nobody notices me.
Yeah.
I don't wear a hoodie, but I'll wear the worst jacket I have,
Yeah.
my trousers. I don't want to be noticed. I don't want to attract attention.
Hmm.
The streets are not safe.
Yeah.
Um, the city isn't safe. There's London. There are no English people here. There are few people like me, but I'm not English either. It's mostly Arabs here, but rich Arabs,
Yeah.
not nice Arabs,
Yeah.
throwing their money
I know
around.
what you mean. Not my,
Men
yeah.
walking in front of the women trailing them like dogs trailing their. We
Yeah.
don't treat dogs that way. Uh, that kind of, that's not London. You go a little ways out, and it's still England, but a
Yeah.
downtrodden England, bad eating habits England, sickly England. They still have this notion of themselves as what they were,
Hmm.
but it's gone. It's almost Disney World, Buckingham Palace, the changing of the guards. Every day the horse guards walk up beneath my window on the way to Hyde Park.
Yeah.
And it's not real. I don't know. Honestly, Frank, it's frightening.
Have you at all read any of or listened to any of Tom Holland? He wrote a book called Dominion.
I've heard of that book.
Yeah, Tom Holland and Dominic Sambrook have what I think is the most successful podcast in the world now, which is called The
Oh,
Rest is History.
oh.
And it's my favorite podcast. They have different positions politically, but Tom Holland is someone you should read Dominion, because he's perhaps, along with Mary Beard, the world's foremost historian of ancient Rome. And
Mm-hmm.
he's written a book called Dominion about how, in fact, the
Oh,
ethics of
yes.
Christianity and Christ's teaching have
Yes.
actually shaped Western civilization in a way
Yes.
without which humanism, feminism, gay rights, none of these things would be possible, because all
Yes.
of
Yes.
the idea of universal human rights is an idea that comes from the heart
From of Christianity.
of Christianity.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Tom Holland is not a Christian, but he's written
Yeah.
this wonderful big thick book called Dominion, which is one of my favorite books. But in any case, the Rest is History podcast is something that you would find very interesting.
All right, I'm writing it down.
You would enjoy it.
Okay. The rest.
And they have significant stature, because when they wanted to do an episode on Beethoven and Mozart, the history thereof, they did it in the Royal Albert Hall with the LSO Symphony as they're behind them on the stage playing the bits for them they were talking about.
Oh,
So that's
Fantastic.
that's quite a bit of clout.
When did they do this? A couple of
Oh, a
years
couple of
ago or
years ago, 2 years ago.
3 years ago? Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, they're always doing things like this. When they come to Boston, they pack out, our concert halls and other things with their listeners. They have a very faithful following because they're completely different people. Dominic's a modern historian, particularly of American history, and he's written, major works on American history as an Englishman. And Tom is a Roman and ancient historian. But between the two of them, what they don't do is politicize history, so that when they're talking about Romans or whatever, then they're trying to understand who the Romans were, not giving it a 21st century spin to teach us sort of a lesson through it. So it's not politicized, which I find
Oh,
very
that's good.
refreshing.
Very refreshing.
You'd like
Very.
that.
All right. Well, thank you. I shall make
Yeah.
a
And then
note
what
of
can
it.
we do for you other than put you in our book club and talk to you again very soon about your interesting life and what you're up to next? What would you like to
I,
have happen?
I can't imagine. I lead a very, very small and quiet life. I really
Yeah.
do. And all of this is a little bit overwhelming for me. Even doing this, although I enjoy this so tremendously, um, I couldn't ask for more than what you've offered. Really,
Good.
thank you.
Good. Well, I can't tell you, I am such a fan of this book. I'm going to say it one more time. Where Snowbirds Play by Gina Goldhammer. This is the paperback. But I want to tell everybody who listens to me, if you want to read something refreshingly original, this is it. This doesn't fit anywhere. This is its own book. And I think it's going to be around for a long time because original books sometimes do well or sometimes don't do well with critics, but human beings know when they're looking at the real deal. This is the real deal. So
Wow.
thank you for being on my program.
Thank
And
you, Frank, for having me.
yeah, and consider me a friend, and you'll have Ernie's connection. If we can ever help you in some way, whatever it might be, you let me know.
Oh, God bless you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
mean it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're an
I
original,
appreciate
and
it.
it's wonderful to talk with you. Just so refreshing. Off the chart.
Oh, thank you.
Stick around
I'll
and
stay on for Ernie. Yes.
stay on for Ernie and buonasera and buonanotte and all those good
Yeah,
Italian things.
buonanotte. Buonanotte here.
Sì.
Yes.
A domani.
A
Talk to you.
domani.
A domani.
Ci vediamo.